going on, everybody? And thank you all again so very much for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale. And as always, sitting right beside me, it's me, Cherry Blossom, Kyle Filson.
How's it going, everybody? Yes, I'm here back in Skeleton Studios, back in Texas. Just got back from Colorado with my wife. I actually met Cam and his wife up there, bumped into him.
We had to eat a little dinner and then we had to leave.
Yeah, that was pretty good. We went to a place called like Shanghai's, I think.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it?
It was really, really good. We were joking and laughing off air. It's like, you can tell we're getting old because that place shuts down after about 8 o'clock. I'm talking about the whole town.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing to do. And that's just the way I like it. When I was in my 20s, I would have hated that town. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing to do.
No.
It was fun. We went on a good hike, me and my wife around the San Juan River. It was fun. This is the first time that we've been on a vacation to Colorado without the kids.
It was great,
and I
wasn't
can't tell you how nice it was. Just the picking up the stuff, like taking the kids up to the mountain. You got to drop this one's off. This one's going to ski school.
Keeping up with everything.
These two ain't going to ski school. I got to get them a locker so they can store their stuff. Here's some money so you can eat lunch. You know what I mean? Then you drive back down off the mountain. You're back. That took 2 hours.
Yep.
Then you look at your watch and you're like, well, I got about 5 hours before I got to head back up the mountain. Then you head back up the mountain. You're waiting on one. Two of them are ready. One of them's cold. One of them's still up there somewhere.
Dude.
And then and then you get home.
I told you were going to like it.
This one wants this to eat. This one doesn't. I mean, it's just, look, I love my children, but it's a lot of work. When I went on this vacation, I didn't feel like I had to do any work. We got massages. It was awesome. It was one of the best trips I've had. I'll tell you, it's probably the best trip I've had since I went to California like 8 years ago with just my wife. I love them. But man, it's a lot of work.
But they're a bit extra.
You know what's funny is 2 of the 3 love skiing and snowboarding. Luke does not care at all. I got all of my kids started when they were real young. Luke, even as a little kid, he would do it. He would ski, but he just most of the times like, I'm good after about 3 hours. He's like, I'm ready to come home. The other 2, they were just like me. They could do it all day. I could too. I remember, this is how I know people don't care, but I used to go and snowboard all day. So that's like 9 to 4 when the lifts close. I would come home, grab something to eat. Then I would go play hockey at an outdoor rink till like 10 p.m. Then come home and hang out and do it all the next day. Now,
and drink.
Yeah. If I snowboarded 4 or 5 hours, I'm done, dude. I'm cooked. Like I'm asleep by 6 p.m.
Well, you were doing this all pre like 25.
Yeah, that's true.
Man, you were just a stone's throw from 50, man.
Yeah, I know. Boy, time flies, right?
Gets faster when it circles the drain.
Time flies. Well, I know you were up there too. You had a good time, right?
Well, yeah, we had a great time. We old folks it up. Like we just love walking around and checking out and sightseeing like that. And we've gone so much now that we know some people up there. So we'll go to places and visit with them and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. I enjoy going up there, but I do also really enjoy coming home because snow is a burden.
Oh, yeah.
It's nice off to all of y'all that live in it all the time. Not for me. Not for me.
That's what's so nice about it. You get to visit it. It's cool. And then you get to come home.
Yeah.
I know you and your wife are huge Kansas City Chiefs fans. So I know you guys had a big Super Bowl party. Tell me about that.
Dude.
You didn't watch it?
Literally, folks. Yeah, literally. It's been since, like I always make the joke, I haven't watched a full football game, NFL. And I've watched college ball, as much as I can. But as far as NFL, I haven't watched a full NFL game since Troy Aikman was the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
I didn't watch any of it, and I don't regret it. Now, you know what? There's like one time a year I always end up watching a game that's like Thanksgiving because I'm at a family member's house. You got a full belly. There's nothing to do. We already know all each other's stories, so I sit there and I'll watch the 2 or 3 games that are on the TV.
All of my wife's family, none of them, I believe, like none, watch professional football. They're all college football fans. So if the college is playing, now some of them may watch a little of it if it's on, but as far as having to see it and we get together, it's not even on then. You know what's on? Couch hunting.
Yeah.
My brother-in-laws, man, there is always going to be some hunting or fishing show on television wherever we're at. Like if we're all together, it's hunting on TV or it's fishing on TV. That's what's on all the time.
One major difference I noticed between Colorado and Texas is like when you go to the gas stations or the Walmart or any of the stores, the lack of team pride. What I mean is,
you brought that up.
You can't go into a grocery store in this state. You can't go into a convenience store in this state. You can't go to most gas stations without there being Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, even the schools, Texas A&M, Texas. You'll see stuff at every store. It doesn't matter how small. It could be a sticker. It could be a keychain.
There'll be some Texas team, something
I went
there.
all over. I didn't see any of the Colorado teams because I actually wanted like
Avalanche, baby.
an Avalanche, something, with Nathan McKinnon on there and stuff. I couldn't find it. Nobody had it. I didn't see anybody in town wearing anything. There's like no team pride up there.
Where we were at, they weren't concerned with it.
It is crazy. Speaking of crazy, you did an episode a couple episodes ago about strange coincidences.
Yes, I did.
We had an email from a person. Check this out. It says,
Awesome.
Hey guys, I adore your show and both of you.
Hey, thank you so much.
I just listened to your coincidences episode and have a little one I still laugh about.
Well, here's a coincidence. You adore us makes us adore you.
That's correct. Well, I probably have many, especially since I'm a twin, and things like this seem to always find us. But this one immediately popped into my head, and it's not twin related. I began working at a farrier supply store several years ago, and the girl already working there was probably a decade or so younger than me. I was 33 at the time. Despite this age difference, we became really good friends, and still are. I'd been working there around a year, and had met her husband, etc., and we began hanging out together. We'd go to dinner sometimes, and those kinds of activities. I say this just to set the understanding that we knew each other pretty well by then. Anyway, I was rearranging a room at my house that was used for storage and moving some of my artwork from back in high school. And one of the paintings was of Boba Fett. It had hung in an art show back in 1996 or 97 and won the People's Choice Award, which was decided not by adult judges, but by various voters who viewed the show. Being Boba, it had garnered a ton of homemade ribbons from the local elementary school kids who were brought over to the high school for the art show. Now, initially, I'd kept all the homemade ribbons, but over the years, all of them had fallen off the painting except for one that seemed to be super glued. It was really just stuck with regular tape, though, but it was stuck to the painting. As I reminisced over how popular the painting had been, I turned that homemade ribbon over, and on the back was a heartfelt compliment signed by none other than my friend's husband. He had been one of the elementary school kids who voted for my painting decades before. Now, multiple schools had attended the show, and probably 24 ribbons had originally been stuck on the painting. But that at this time, only one that had stayed for almost 2 decades was the one made out by my friend's husband, who I'd never met or known until I was in my mid-30s. We still laugh over it to this day and still have this ribbon attached to my painting. Keep doing what you do. Maybe I'll write with more stories later. I've had many experiences in my life and have many family stories as well. Artemis Gray. Man, that is a strange coincidence.
That is awesome.
Right? She didn't know the guy at the time. And of all the ribbons that were on there,
great.
that was the one that was left.
The whole thing is great.
It makes you think that we are in a simulation, right? It seems that way.
It's one of those weird things like that. Is just talk about it. Received a bunch of messages and lots of stuff like that sent to us of these strange coincidences, and some just as small as, little bitty, just in passing things, and then some like that. I like those. I love the coincidences of where like people after years of don't know how close they were together, and then you find it again just like that. As a friend's husband was the one that actually gave it. That whole thing sounds like it would come from a movie. Yeah, it does. And if you pay attention, I think a lot more coincidences happen to you, or almost happen to you all the time. You're just not aware. I was just at a light at an intersection right here by the studio the other day, and the light turned green, and for whatever reason, I didn't go through it. And then I started to ease forward, and just that time, a truck come blowing right through there. Ooh. If I had gone 2 seconds earlier, he would have T-boned me. Man. And it's like, wonder how many times in your life were you this close to death and you just didn't even notice it? The show would have taken a level up. I'd have got us a new co-host, y'all.
That's true. That is true. What do you got there?
I got something you're going to love, because Lon knows you so well. And he, like I said, he loves to hook me up with the crazy topics here. There was a creepy white hairless, not deer. There was an encounter near Eastern Kentucky University.
Oh, wow. Tell me
like
more.
A not deer isn't creepy enough, right? That now it's hairless.
Yeah, right. It's getting worse.
That's just steadily nightmare fueling. It says, in the late fall of 2016, I was in college at Eastern Kentucky University. My now fiance and I wanted to spend some time together one evening. So she came to Richmond, Kentucky to come see me, and we decided just to go for a walk around the Taylor Fork ecology area that was just a few miles off of campus. Well, we tried to drive into the park, but her Volkswagen Beetle had trouble going over the poorly maintained gravel road leading into the area, so we parked at a nearby church and walked up the same gravel road instead. We're not even going to talk about poorly maintained roads after we got back from our vacation. We're just going to leave it at that, y'all. So it says about 5 to 10 minutes into this walk, we heard something moving in the brush off to the side. So we stopped, and I shone my light in that direction that I heard the noise, and I saw something that I couldn't recognize. From the ground to its head, it was about 4 foot tall, and the shape somewhere between a female deer and some kind of tall, slender dog. Now, it had eyes that glowed yellowish white in the light of my phone and had a stark white skin, like there was no fur. The body was deer-shaped, but the eyes looked like they faced forward like that of a predator. That's the part I can't wrap my head around. I wish I had taken a video or a photo, but we were terrified, and without thinking, we just turned around and went in the opposite direction, walking very quickly. Then I heard footsteps on the gravel behind us, so I grabbed her hand and we all ran down back to the path to make it to her car. Now, I know this is kind of a long-winded story, but if anyone else has ever seen something similar or has an idea of what this animal might have been, I'd like to know. It's been on my mind ever since. Ray.
Wow.
So,
these non-deer stories, they're kind of freaky.
Yeah, and it's like we say, it's getting worse. Now, that's not the only one that we have read or, have gotten any kind of information about where they say the eyes are facing forward, like that of a predator. Now, if you know who Gary Larson is in The Far Side, he draws some that look like this with the eyes facing forward in there like that. It looks funny. But to see a deer and it looking at you like a predator with its eyes perfect like that, that's enough. I don't need to see anything else. If it's the perfect deer shape and it's got the creepy predator eyes, that's good enough.
Well, that's why I don't think it's a deer, right?
No, it can't be, man.
Because that's not anatomically the way their heads are built.
Yeah, it can't be. I don't know what it is, but it's disturbing.
It's like something trying to copy it, some kind of mimic.
Or, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's why it feels
like it's
demonic
caught in
to me.
between shapes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
Very.
I don't want to see that.
Check this one out. It says, "Hello, gentlemen. I love to listen to you and have for years.
Thanks.
I live in western Kentucky,
Hey-o.
not far from the land between the lakes. In fact, I work in Calvert City, which is even closer. I've been going to LBL since I was a small child. But to cut to the chase, I've had encounters with morphing trash bags on 2 separate occasions, but several years apart. Both happened on the Trace, which is the main highway that starts north of Grand Rivers, Kentucky, and ends in Dover, Tennessee, in the south. The first one was during the daytime. I was in the back seat of my grandmother's car, with my aunt and uncle were with us also. My grandmother and I both saw what we thought was a little white goat on the slope of the hill by the road, and said so while pointing it out. We had several seconds to see it, but as the other adults in the car looked to see where the goat was, it morphed into a white grocery bag, much smaller than the goat it was only seconds before. Now, the second time, I was a teenager, driving up the Trace with some friends. It was at night, and I was driving, but I can assure you there was no alcohol or drugs involved. With the high beams on, I saw a black trash bag blowing around on the asphalt in the wind, like up in the air and back down and around. I pulled into the other lane of this 2-lane highway to make sure I did not run it over. As the bag came back down on the right lane ahead of my car, it landed and morphed into what I can only describe as a black coyote, and then ran off the road. I only got a second to see it, but it had 4 legs, a head, and a tail, and it was all black. But only a second before, it was an airborne plastic bag caught up in the wind. No one else in the car saw the bag or the black coyote. Both of these could have been just my mind playing tricks on me, I guess, but I don't think so. And I've been hearing others come forward recently with their similar stories. and it's really brought these memories to the front of my mind. You are free to use my stories. Thanks for what you do, JTB. Ooh, wow. So who would have thought we'd start collecting trash bag Duende stories? Maybe we need to start compiling those for use in the future.
We've got about 3 or 4 more.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that we've got within the last couple of months of people having more like this. Now, that's the first one that I've heard of being a white trash bag where you could, it's like goes from goat to trash bag.
I know. And see, that's the thing with this show is like the more times people write in with bizarre stories, you don't realize it at the time, but other people have the same experience and then they write it. So it's like it just keeps building. It's insane to me because every once in a while you'll come across a strange story. You're like, wow, that's a one-off. No, it's not.
All you got to do is bring it up, and it turns out it's not a one-off.
It's crazy.
But to be able to see 2, that's pretty cool. But it's also in that area. So it makes me wonder, right? Like, what's going on in that area?
And that still is a cool name for a band. Trash Bag Duendes.
Oh, Trash Bag Duendes is the best. The best ever. Now, I got one more here before we bounce into your segment, homie. A hideous, evil gnome terrorizes residents in Porterville, California.
Oh, please. No, an evil-looking gnome.
An evil-looking gnome. It says a woman by the name of Tammy moved herself and her 3 children into a small farmhouse on the Tule River near Porterville. And soon after moving in, Tammy started feeling like something was watching them and had an uneasy feeling every time she walked by the old barn. And for some reason, most of the animals on the farm avoided that rickety old barn. And then she started noticing a number of ducks and chickens started dwindling away. That's not good. Now we know. So one night, Tammy and her son, they were coming back from the grocery store when she said she was parking her car, got out. She noticed movement. Thinking it was something, she picked, or nothing rather, she grabbed the grocery bags. She noticed it again, except this time, she said this movement was what she described was accompanied by a very freaky, very evil-sounding chuckle. So looking over in the direction of the noise, she noticed about 50 yards from her was a small, humanoid-looking figure. And she describes this little evil gnome. It's like a red cap, right? That's what she's seen. Says the figure was about 2 to 3 foot in height, wore black baggy pants and a gold-colored shirt. Now, the face was partially covered by a long salt and pepper colored beard, and on top of the head was a long red pointed hat. Says the nose was very large and bulbous, and the eyes and the head and all this stuff was deep set. Said the figure grinned at her and her son, and Tammy noticed that the grin was almost ear to ear, and that the teeth had a very ugly brown color that appeared to her to be either pointed or very jagged. Well, at this point, she's horrified, right?
Yeah, I'm
Freaks
sure.
out, drops the groceries, grabs her boy, and runs towards the house. She said the cackling little fella started chasing him, so it's like running and laughing. She gets inside, closes the door, gets everything done, tells her 2 daughters, this is what we saw. She sees movement outside the kitchen window. She goes to check that out. She sees the top of the hat running back and forth under the window, laughing. Finally, she said what seemed like forever, it just kind of vanished. It was just gone. She was able to go out and get the rest of the groceries. Now, this was the only time that she said she actually saw this thing, but it was until she moved out. She always heard this chuckling go by coming from the barn if she would ever go by it. She said she don't know if it was taunting her, what was going on. That's what was going down. Now, it says this. He said, now, you would think that this would be just an isolated occurrence, but it doesn't sound like the gnome was through with her. All right, get a load of this. It said that the family moved to the same house in 2010. A family had moved into the same house, and according to this person's wife, all the stuff went down. Basically, the same stuff was going down. They heard the same thing, described the same creature, all of this stuff. Wow. So it's like this thing has hung out there in this area. Now, here's what's interesting. The second family had seen something along the lines of, I don't know if it was at the same time or in between, but they saw the little creepy gnome, but one of the other gnomes that they saw was dressed a little different. It actually had maroon pants and like a little waistcoat. It sounds, if you could take the idea of like a hobbit.
Yeah.
Right? Like a 2-foot tall hobbit, the way they were dressed in the movie, like Bilbo and all that, but like a dirty, horrible hobbit. Not like Gollum, not quite Gollum-esque, but like a dirty, horrible hobbit. That's what the other family said that they had ended up seeing while it was there too.
Like Cat's Eye.
Yeah,
that's what I think of, right?
Yeah, basically just
like
Cat's
Eye. I love the
Eye.
descriptions of their clothing and their little hats and stuff. I find that part of the story so intriguing, and I don't know why.
I'm with you.
It's like, why do they all dress the same? How do they have like a dress code?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because this has always got me. They are almost exactly like the folklore from like the Netherlands, from all of this where it comes from, right? From Scandinavian folklore. They look almost identical to that of what they all describe. You would think that they might take on a different look here or in South America, right? Or in Asia. Yeah. Like the gnomes might have different dress. They might be a whole different subclass of other gnomes. You don't know, but they don't. Like they all are dressed
exactly the same.
Exactly like you would picture a gnome to be dressed.
It is so bizarre. Weird. I love those stories. Let's take a break. And when we get back from the break, I'm going to be talking about some close encounters of the deadly kind. Stick with us, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Lately, there has been a surge in news regarding UAPs, the modern term for what was once known as UFOs. It makes me wonder the reasons behind this increased attention. Is the government privy to information that eludes the general public? Perhaps signaling and impeding extraterrestrial invasion? Could there be a shadowy pact forged with beings from another world, exchanging human subjects for covert technologies? And is this clandestine agreement on the brink of expiration? Alternatively, is the UFO discourse a deliberate distraction, steering our focus away from imminent geopolitical tensions, such as the upcoming election, conflicts in the Ukraine, Israel, and possibly Taiwan? Undoubtedly, the subject of UFOs has captivated my interest since childhood. Now, we're all familiar with iconic UFO incidents like Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest encounter, the Phoenix Lights, Travis Walton, and of course, Betty and Barney Hill. My aim is to delve into lesser-known close encounters of a more ominous nature. I want to talk about some close encounters of the deadly kind. Some stories you may not be too familiar with. I want to start with a deadly crash and then a deadly collision with strangeness all around. Let's begin. When the United States Air Force earnestly delved into the investigation of unidentified flying objects, the responsibility fell upon the shoulders of an accomplished World War II veteran, Captain Edward J. Ruppelt. He was distinguished by 5 battle stars, 3 air medals, and 2 distinguished flying crosses for his role as a bombardier. He approached the task with the utmost dedication, and despite the American press's initial dismissive attitude towards flying saucers, a tragic incident in January 1948 altered the perception dramatically. The turning point occurred when a Captain Thomas F. Mantell's P-51 Mustang crashed into a Kentucky farm while pursuing a mysterious object hovering in the vicinity. Mantell and his squadron had engaged with the enigmatic phenomenon, but as he moved in for closer inspection, silence befell him, leading to the abrupt descent of his aircraft. The untimely demise of the accomplished pilot and decorated World War II veteran Mantell had a profound impact on America's perspectives on UFOs. It not only convinced the public of the reality of UFOs, but also instilled a sense of caution, sparking the belief that extraterrestrial encounters might not necessarily be benign. It all began in the early afternoon of January 7th, 1948, when staff at the Kentucky-based Godman Army Airfield, a portion of Fort Knox, noticed something to them, at least, was perceived as deeply strange. A highly reflective, circular-shaped object seemingly hovering in the skies and in disturbingly close proximity to the base. It was reportedly enormous, too. Control tower employees at Fort Knox, the resident intelligence officer and base commander, a Colonel Guy Hicks, and various high-ranking personnel did their utmost to identify the mysterious visitor. They all failed to do so. Despite keeping a careful eye on it for about 1.5 hours, given that UFOs had been big news for around 7 months, ever since Kenneth Arnold, in June 1947, had his celebrated flying saucer encounter over Washington state. An air of definitive unease quickly developed among those who were carefully watching the object. As luck would have it, while Godman Army Airfield was in a state of concern, there was light on the horizon. Or rather, there was a squadron of 4 P-51 Mustang aircraft on the horizon, commanded by Captain Thomas Mantell. As Mantell's team approached Godman, they were ordered to try and identify the mystifying, hovering thing in the sky. You would imagine that 4 crews would have had no problem in doing exactly that. There was a problem, however. At almost lightning speed, all 4 aircraft became just one. One of the planes was severely low on fuel, something that necessitated a hasty landing at Godman Field. A second pilot, concerned over becoming somewhat disoriented due to a lack of an oxygen mask, requested permission to break off and land. Permission was granted. Such was the level of concern that the pilot had, however, a decision was taken to have the third plane escort him to the ground just to be safe. In a matter of just mere minutes, Mantell was, rather astonishingly, all alone. The only one left to check out the enigma in the skies. It was to be Mantell's last task as a pilot of the U.S. Air Force. It would also be the last thing he would do, period, aside that is from dying violently. At around 15,000 feet, Mantell, who also lacked an oxygen mask, radioed Godman to let them know he could see the object pretty clearly, and added that it seemed to be moving at roughly 50% of his own speed, which would have put it at around 180 miles per hour. The UFO was, Mantell added, huge in size. He ultimately climbed to around 25,000 feet, advising ground personnel that he was going to attempt to take a closer look. No word was ever heard from Mantell again. The unknown object vanished, and more than 120 miles from Godman, Mantell's Mustang ceased its climb due to the rigors of very high altitude exposure, and soon began to hurtle back to Earth, slamming into the farmland with full, pulverizing force. Mantell was, unsurprisingly, killed instantly. The official cause of the tragedy: Mantell passed out as a result of lack of sufficient oxygen and never came to. He was just 25 years old of age, and Mantell was a victim of his own carelessness and overenthusiasm. Or was he not? Was his death a case of termination at the hands of lethal extraterrestrials? We don't really know. It's unfair and incorrect to put the blame on Mantell's lack of professionalism for what happened. He may have only been 25, but he was a man with thousands of hours in the air, and someone who was decorated for his bravery in the Second World War, so he definitely knew what he was doing. Doesn't seem likely that he would climb to such a high altitude without an oxygen mask, only to pass out and fall to his death. Clearly, Mantell saw something, but the question is, what was it? It's difficult to say with 100% certainty, because rather oddly, within 30 minutes of the crash, this object was gone, despite having hung in the skies for several hours previously. An investigation was clearly warranted. The investigation fell to the U.S. Air Force officials' UFO study program, also known as Project Sign. The The official verdict at first was that Mantell had misperceived the planet Venus, assuming it to have been a smaller-sized object at relatively close quarters, rather than a huge, heavenly body multi-million miles away. The theory did have some merit, as Venus was in the general position to be seen. The problem, however, was that on a January afternoon, it would have been practically impossible to see the planet at all. There was another possibility, one shrouded in official military secrecy. At the time, when UFOs were all the rage, the U.S. Navy's Office of Naval Research had developed and was flying very large balloons under the cover of an operation called Project Skyhook. Although chiefly utilized to collect meteorological data, Skyhooks and the attendant project were deeply classified. As for their appearance, they were very reflective, just like the unknown object seen by Mantell. Moreover, it's most unlikely that Mantell would have had an awareness of Project Skyhook, as he had no particular need to know of its existence. And there's another matter. Because Skyhook was such a secret project, it's not impossible that Project Sign staff found themselves in a deep quandary. If they suspected that Skyhook balloons were the culprit, revealing such would potentially have compromised a classified operation, something that may have led to the initial promotion of the Venus theory instead. In that sense, there truly may have been a cover-up behind Mantell's death, but not because of a direct flying saucer-themed angle to the affair. There is, however, a problem with the Skyhook theory. In 1952, the Mantell affair was once again, it fell under the official scrutiny. The investigating officer was Captain Edward Ruppelt, then the head of Project Blue Book, the Air Force's successor to Project Sign, and a short-lived operation, Project Grudge, which Ruppelt also worked on. Ruppelt certainly didn't rule out the balloon theory. To him, it made a great deal of sense. Try as he might, however, Ruppelt, with all his door-opening abilities, was unable to uncover any documentation conclusively, proving that the whole thing was provoked by a disastrous case of mistaken identity. And Ruppelt had more than a few choice words of criticism to say about the Air Force's conclusions on the encounter and subsequent death of Captain Mantell. He said, to use a trite term, it was a masterpiece in the art of weasel wording. It said that the UFO might have been Venus, or it could have been a balloon, maybe two balloons. It probably was Venus, except that this is doubtful because Venus was too dim to be seen in the afternoon. Captain Ruppelt died in 1960 of a heart attack at the very young age of 37. On the matter of fatal aircraft crashes in the 1940s, and specifically with UFO connections, it's worth noting the words of retired Sergeant Rita Hill of the British Royal Air Force. Now, she spent much of her late 1940s military career at an RAF base in England, in the country of Wiltshire, at a place called Boscombe Down, from where both then and now new and radically designed experimental aircraft are test flown. In 1998, Hill told reporters something that should be kept in mind when we consider the circumstances surrounding the death of Captain Mantell. She said, "With UFOs, I'll tell you what I can, but it was all top secret at the time. When the test pilots had finished their tests, they would have briefings, which we would sometimes attend. These were all very hush-hush. Sometimes the pilots would report seeing strange lights and objects in the sky. They weren't called UFOs at the time, but they would say that when they saw these strange lights, the instruments on aircraft would go haywire, and sometimes the altimeter would just stop, which is a disaster in itself. There were always crashes with experimental aircraft. These weren't little biplanes. We're talking about jets and so on. At times, we would have a crash a week. I was in charge of a crash crew and had two lads with me. We went to a crash site. When we went to a crash site, everything had to be found. Buttons off the tunics, scraps, and so on. Sometimes it would take us weeks to find everything, and from there the wreckage would be taken for reconstruction. In these cases, the reports went to the Air Ministry at Whitehall, and we are all sworn to secrecy. It's only now that I've said anything about what I saw." And there's more to come. One man with intimate knowledge of the death of Captain Thomas Mantell was Captain James F. Duesler, the deputy commander at Godman Air Force Base, on the day that Mantell lost his life. Now, Duesler's testimony is highly important, as he was one of the first-hand witnesses to the unusual object in the sky. He likened its shape to that of an ice cream cone, standing on its head. Not only that, there seemed to be a black-colored band around the object, one that was rotating incredibly fast, he said. Its lower section was red in color, something that is a deep variance with the description of a skyhook balloon. Rather significantly, Duesler said that less than 12 hours after Mantell's death, yet another UFO was seen at Godman. It was around 1 a.m. the next day when a missile-shaped craft of unknown origins and giving off an orange glow was seen moving in a wide arc around the base. The matter was never resolved. Then there are the comments that Duesler made about Mantell's body. Despite the fact that the aircraft had plummeted to the ground from a height of tens of thousands of feet, and although each and every one of his bones were utterly shattered, there was not even a cut or a scratch on Mantell's skin. The aircraft was not at all badly damaged, although the wings had broken off the aircraft on impact, and in Duesler's view was not at all consistent with what one would expect to see in an aircraft that hit the ground with both speed and force. So what was it consistent with? That's a question everyone involved in this affair would sorely like answered. Venus, a secret balloon, or a genuine UFO? The jury remains steadfastly undecided. Let's move on to another crazy story. In July 1993, a lengthy and undeniably controversial document was mailed anonymously to a U.S.-based UFO researcher named Elaine Douglas. It was titled Research Findings on the Chihuahua Disk Crash and was dated March 23, 1992. Whoever Douglas's insider source was, he or she appears to have had access to extraordinarily and highly classified information on not just UFOs, but on human fatalities resulting from direct exposure to the flying saucer phenomenon. As to why Douglas specifically should have been on the receiving end of the report, there is an intriguing possibility. In 1993, the year in which she received the report, Douglas was the Washington, D.C. representative of a public group called Operation Right to Know, or the ORTK. A deeply proactive body at the time was lobbying the U.S. government to release its UFO files, as in all of them, even the highly classified ones. The ORTK was thrust into the limelight by local media when its staff organized a highly visible picket march in the heart of D.C. in July 1993. And the very same month, Douglas obtained the illuminating documents. Perhaps there were some sympathetic insiders whose attention was caught by the near-unique activity then going down in the nation's capital. And just perhaps one of those insiders decided to secretly single out Douglas to be the one person who would get to know at least some of the truth behind the UFO phenomenon. The document begins. It says, on August 25th, 1974, at 22:07 hours, U.S. air defense radar detected an unknown approaching U.S. airspace from the Gulf of Mexico. Originally, the object was tracked at 2,200 knots, or 2,530 miles per hour, on a bearing of 325 degrees and at an altitude of 75,000 feet. A course that would intercept U.S. territory about 40 miles southwest of Corpus Christi, Texas. After approximately 60 seconds of observation, at a position 155 miles southeast of Corpus Christi, the object simultaneously decelerated to approximately 1,700 knots, or 1,955 miles an hour. It turned to a heading of 290 degrees and began to slow descent. Shortly after the crash was detected by U.S. authorities, a full-blown air defense alert was secretly initiated. Before any form of aerial interception of the unknown vehicle could be scrambled, however, it suddenly turned on a course that was destined to take it away from U.S. territory and toward Mexico. Indeed, it entered Mexican airspace, approximately 40 miles south of Brownsville, Texas. American military radar personnel tracked the object for approximately 500 miles to a point near the 18th century town of Coyame in the state of Chihuahua, not far from the U.S. border. There, it suddenly disappeared from the radar screens. Apparently, staff at additional military facilities were also monitoring the situation, as is evidenced by the fact that further data surfaced which filled in the blanks of the opening minutes of the otherworldly affair. Continuing with the story, Douglas's confidant said that during the course of its flight over Mexican airspace, the object leveled off at approximately 45,000 feet, then descended to 20,000 feet. The descent was in what was described as level steps, rather than a smooth curve or straight line, and each level was maintained for approximately 5 minutes. The author of the report then noted the object was tracked by 2 different military radar installations. It would have been within range of Brownsville civilian radar, but it assumed that no civilian radar detected the object due to a lack of any such reports. The actual point of the disappearance from the radar screens was what they thought or described was at a barren and sparsely populated area of northern Mexico. Now, at first, wrote Douglas's informant, it was assumed that the object had merely descended below the radar's horizon. Although a careful watch of the radar screens was duly maintained, the UFO was not tracked again. As will soon become apparent, there is a very good reason for the disappearance of the craft. At first, Douglas's source continued, it was assumed that the object had possibly been a meteor, chiefly as a result of its high speed and descending flight path. Deeply problematic with such a theory, however, is the fact that though meteors do normally travel at high speeds, they descend in smooth arcs, and certainly not in step-by-step motions. And if it really needs to be said, meteors most assuredly do not make sudden 35-degree changes in their courses. Clearly, something deeply strange was afoot in the night skies of Mexico. Shortly thereafter, there was a dramatic development in the story, as the document makes abundantly clear. It says, 52 minutes after the disappearance, civilian radio traffic indicated that a civilian aircraft had gone down in that area too. But it was clear that the missing aircraft had departed from El Paso International with a destination of Mexico City, and could not, therefore, have been the object that was tracked over the Gulf of Mexico. It was noted, however, that they both disappeared at the same time in the same area. A sensational and extraordinary picture was coming together. There appeared to have been a violent mid-air collision between a definitive UFO. They didn't know what they were tracking, between it and a small aircraft that took off from El Paso. There was a mid-air collision. Elaine Douglas was told later that with daylight the next day, Mexican authorities began a search for the missing plane. Approximately around 10:35 hours, there came a radio report that wreckage from the missing plane had been spotted from the air. Almost immediately came a report of a second plane on the ground a few miles from the first. A few minutes later, an additional report stated that the second plane was circular-shaped and apparently in one piece, although damaged. A few minutes after, the Mexican military clamped a radio silence on all search efforts. Douglas's source confided in her that by this time, all of the intercepted and duly recorded radio transmissions of the Mexicans were secretly being forwarded to senior personnel in the CIA for analysis, and possibly 2 more agencies, although this latter point remained unconfirmed. The CIA immediately swung into action. A team comprised of highly trained personnel was put together with one goal in mind: to recover the strange circular object that had collided with the small aircraft, which obviously happened to be in the same area at just about the worst time possible. It was made very clear to the recovery team that if all attempts at diplomacy failed, the unknown craft was to be taken out of the hands of the Mexican military by force. And if it really came down to it, and there was no choice left available, by deadly force. There was a very good reason for this, as Douglas's contact explained to her. Requests were initiated at the highest levels between the United States and the Mexican governments that the U.S. recovery team be allowed onto Mexican territory to assist. These requests were met with professed ignorance and a flat refusal of any cooperation. For the Mexicans, and quite understandably, it was a case of what happens in Mexico stays in Mexico. Matters then progressed very quickly. By 2100 hours, on August 6, 1974, the recovery team had assembled and been staged at Fort Bliss in Texas. Several helicopters were flown in from some unknown source and assembled in a secured area. These helicopters were painted a neutral sand color and bore no markings. Eyewitnesses indicates that there were 3 smaller aircraft, very possibly UH-1 Hueys, from the description. There was also a larger helicopter, possibly a Sea Stallion. Personnel from this team remained with their craft and had no contact with other Fort Bliss personnel. From what Elaine Douglas was told, it appears that such was the concern over what had occurred that U.S. spy satellites were vectored to photograph the crash site. And just for good measure, American spy planes were ordered to take high-resolution photos of the impact area too. It was then that the CIA realized that there had been a major development. Although the site of the crash of both the aircraft and the UFO were located with ease, to the deep concern of the U.S. intelligence was the fact that they were now no longer in sight. Both had vanished. The reason why soon became apparent. As the pilots of the spy planes scoured the area, they noticed in the distance a convoy comprised of military flatbed trucks, jeeps, and a variety of additional vehicles. There was, however, something very curious about the convoy. It was totally unmoving. On one hand, this was a relief to the CIA. If a confrontation between American and Mexican forces did occur, then the fact that for some odd reason the convoy had come to a grinding halt in the desert made it much easier for the U.S. military to move in, surround the Mexican personnel, secure the area, and take hold of the unknown aerial vehicle. Nevertheless, the CIA knew that the Mexicans were hardly likely to give up such a prized find without a fight. And there was a profound worry that matters might descend into not just an American-Mexican confrontation and standoff, but an outright firefight of fatal proportions and on an international incident. Basically, an alien Alamo, if you like. Fortunately, such a potentially calamitous situation did not come to pass, but, as it transpires, for highly worrying reasons. Orders were given to the pilots of the reconnaissance aircraft to make low-level passes of the Mexican convoy as a means to try to figure out why all of the vehicles had inexplicably stopped in the middle of the desert, rather than heading directly and speedily to the nearest military installation. The answer quickly became clear. As Douglas's source revealed, the aerial photographs taken by the crews showed all trucks and jeeps stopped, some with open doors, and 2 human bodies lying on the ground beside 2 vehicles. The decision was immediately made to launch the recovery team, but the actual launching was held up for the arrival of additional equipment and 2 additional personnel. It was not until 1438 hours that the helicopters departed Fort Bliss. Not long after, a team of U.S. military personnel and a group of experts in the field of biological warfare were on the ground. All convoy personnel were dead, most within the trucks. Some recovery team members, dressed in bioprotection suits, reconfigured the straps holding the object on the flatbed truck, then attached them to a cargo cable from the Sea Stallion. By 1714 hours, the recovered object was on its way to U.S. territory. Before leaving the convoy site, members of the recovery team gathered together the Mexican vehicles and bodies, then destroyed all of it with high explosives. This included the pieces of the civilian light plane, which had been involved in the mid-air collision. At 1746 hours, the Hueys departed. Later that evening, the entire team finally made its way across the border and back into the United States. Their final destination was soon in sight, a point in the Davis Mountains, which are located in western Texas, about 25 miles northeast of the small town of Valentine. On landing, the group was told to sit tight and wait for further instructions. Finally, those instructions came through. A specially converted truck was on its way to the mountainous area in the vicinity of the town of Van Horn. Still under cover of darkness, the helicopter crews made one last flight to where they would rendezvous with the truck. Douglas's contact outlined the next part of the story. It says, the recovered disc was transferred to a truck large enough to handle it and capable of being totally sealed. Some of the personnel from the Hueys transferred the convoy. All helicopters then returned to their original bases for decontamination procedures. The convoy continued non-stop, using back roads and smaller highways and staying away from cities. The destination of the convoy reportedly was Atlanta, Georgia. Here the hard evidence thins out. One unconfirmed report says that the disc was eventually transferred to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another says that the disc was either transferred after that to another unnamed base or was taken directly to this unknown base directly from Atlanta. As for the UFO itself, it was described to Douglas as being around 16 feet in diameter and having a weight close to 1,500 pounds. It was convex on both upper and lower surfaces to the same degree and was completely lacking in any doors or windows. The thickness was slightly less than 5 feet, and as for its color, it was silver, very much like polished steel. There were no form of propulsion, very visible to anybody. There were 2 areas on the rim that showed some damage, including an irregular hole approximately 12 inches in diameter, with an indented material around it. The other damage was described as being a 2-foot-wide dent, which was clearly caused by the impact with the unfortunate aircraft, which was referred to as being almost totally destroyed. One of the most worrying parts of the whole affair, namely the matter of how and why the entire Mexican recovery team was found dead, all we have is the following. Unfortunately, what caused the deaths of the Mexican recovery team is not known. Speculation ranges from a chemical released from the disc as a result of the damage to a microbiological agent. There are no indications of death or illness by any of the recovery team. It would not have been illogical for the recovery team to have taken one of the bodies back with them for analysis, but there is no indication of that happening. Perhaps they did not have adequate means of transporting what might have been a biologically contaminated body. Elaine Douglas was advised that the facts that are known have been gathered from 2 eyewitness accounts, documentation illegally copied and partially destroyed from another document. This was done in 1978 by a person who is now dead. Only in February of that year did the notes and documents come into the hands of that secret group. Precisely who or what that group was or still is was never made clear. We can at least assume that the person who chose to confide in Douglas had deep connections to the military, but was seemingly linked to a group of fellow personnel that did not agree with the U.S. government's policy of widespread secrecy when it came to the UFO controversy. There is, however, one more point that's worthy of note. The location to which the disc was apparently taken, namely Atlanta, Georgia. That's because in Atlanta just happens to be the headquarters for the Centers of Disease Control. That's right, the CDC is at the forefront of helping to lessen the untimely stop and any and all threats posed by hostile forces that may wish to unleash deadly viruses upon the United States and its people. Category A viruses for the CDC are considered to be the worst and most serious of all. They are the most specific viruses that says the CDC can be easily spread or transmitted from person to person. So, is that why the bodies or the craft were taken to Atlanta and the CDC? Because something killed all those Mexicans in the convoy? Was it some kind of, like they said, some kind of biological contamination from the aliens? Like maybe there's extraterrestrials, and when they were around and they had contact with the convoy and it killed them all. We will never know. I think the UFO phenomenon is a real thing. I think that the government has been trying to cover it up for a long time, but it's starting to get out there, folks. I hope you enjoyed this story. The two of these stories are very shocking. I have some more that I'll be getting into at a later date. Let's take a break. I'm Kyle Filson. This is Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with Expanded Perspectives.
Hey-o.
Crazy stories. Not as crazy as the morphing trash bag duendes or the evil-looking gnomes, but crazy nonetheless. Check out this story.
Hit me with it.
Before we get out of here. This was a few years ago. I was in the car with my mom on the way home from visiting a friend. It was winter in southern Canada, so there was a ton of snow and driving was hard. The car ends up getting stuck in the deep snow. For those who don't know, it is extremely difficult to get a car out of the snow because the wheels will lose grip and just keep spinning. Often you need to get a tow truck or something like that with tie chains on the wheels, put wooden planks down, or have at least 3 strong guys to push the car out. As my mom and I were figuring out what to do, as we had nothing to get the car unstuck, I saw a girl standing about 10 feet away. She must have been crossing the road and noticed us. The thing is, I didn't see her walk up to us. She looked to be in her early 20s. She just looked like a normal person with dark shoulder-length hair. She was wearing black winter clothes. She had on a coat and a backpack as well. She signaled that she was going to try pushing the car from behind. So we nodded. My mom tries driving, but no luck. My mom said, "Go out and help the girl push the car." As I went to unbuckle my seatbelt, the car went forward as if there was no snow at all. As I said before, it doesn't get unstuck that easy. As we drove, we both turned to wave and thank the girl, but there was no one there. Now, where could she have gone in such a short amount of time? We didn't know. And to be honest, there is no way she could have pushed the vehicle out by herself, not out of that snow. We haven't seen her since, and I always wonder who she was. Was that perhaps our guardian angel? Thanks for what you do.
Ooh.
S.
Nice.
That is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Someone helping you in a time of need, and then they disappear.
Like the third man effect.
You hear so many of these stories of stuff like that happening, and I think they're pretty cool.
I do. I like it. You know what? I mean, would it be surprising? It wouldn't really be surprising. Like we always say, like if they could be scary ghosts, how come there can't be helpful ghosts and supportive ghosts?
Yeah, I agree.
Right? It should always be there. So what do you got going on, man? You ready for this awesome weather that we're going to have this week?
Yeah, it is like spring already. I don't understand it. It makes me kind of fearful of the summer that's approaching because if it's already this warm in February, it's going to be a brutal summer. And I was hoping that it would be a nice cool summer because of El Nino.
What is that? Isn't that Spanish for the Nino?
It is. What was that? What was Chris Farley? He used to do that skit on Saturday Night Live where he was like the weatherman.
He was El Nino.
Oh, he was El Nino. That's what it was.
El Nino.
It's been some time since I've seen it.
It's still so great. Look, you remember not long ago we were talking about black stick men.
Yeah, the trigonometry. We just did an episode
trigonometry. Listen to this story here. Says, y'all are going to like anything that has to do with the Bridgewater Triangle. I got that going on too. I was in the forest. It's part of a place called the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, one of the most haunted areas in the United States. I was in a specific part of it called Profile Rock with 3 of my friends. Now, we were out there late. It was probably about 2:30 or 3 in the morning. We were on our way walking out and down this long winding path to get back to our vehicle. Now keep in mind, it was pitch black out. We could only see like from the moon shining through the trees. Now, I don't know why I turned around. I didn't hear anything and I didn't feel like anything was following us. But I turned around anyway and looked into the back from us, and I saw something running towards us from about 100 feet away.
What was it?
Yeah, right. It was more black than the darkness surrounding us. Now, what scared me wasn't that something was running at us, but it was how it was running at us. You know how a zombie walks in a horror film, like dragging its leg? Yeah, it says here almost limping. It says that's how this thing was running at us, like it had a broken ankle or something. Now, initially, it says, I thought that it could be someone who had gotten injured in the woods or something, and until I saw the thing run past the moonlight. It says, you know how a child draws a person as a stick figure? Well, that's exactly how this thing looked. It had no facial features and no face, just a completely blank-like stick figure. Its body looked the same from what I could see, no definition or anything. Now, I called my friend, who was the closest to me, and I called him in a panicked voice. He glanced in the direction I was looking, that was now a very moonlit area, and I could tell by his facial expression that I wasn't just the only one seeing it. We both took flight and started running. My two other friends were up ahead, and they shot around and asked us what was wrong, and I just replied loudly, you just run. Said, I didn't look back once we were near right by the car, but when I finally got into the car, looked back, it was gone, like it had never even been there. He said, or it should have been on top of us at the speed it was running. Says, I'll never know exactly what that was, but I did Google Black Stick Man sightings and was horrified to find out multiple people all over the world have seen something just like this. Sometimes the unknown is better left unknown.
I could agree with that.
I can wholeheartedly agree with that.
Again, just like we were talking in the beginning, the big intro before the segment, it's like sometimes you think these stories, you hear them or read them and you think it's a one-off. Yeah. Then it turns out there's a lot of other people who have had it. And then how many people have seen them and haven't, reported it? I think far more than we would like to believe. It's crazy.
I think all of these sightings that we've covered and all of the crazy things that we talk about on this show, we've always talked, and I still believe it true to this day, that there are more out there that aren't reported than there are.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually
100%.
Reported.
100%.
Folks, if any of y'all are in the DFW area and you want to pop in and harass somebody for an early morning coffee, drop by, see our buddy Joe. I was talking to Joe the other day. Y'all don't remember Joe from Panther Island? Y'all should. Come on, man. Jiu-Jitsu Joe. You remember Big Joe, Big Jose?
Oh, yeah.
So Jose's also got a place going called Enduro Coffee where he's been hanging out, serving coffee. Now, listen, they're a coffee roaster as well. So if you want to grab some good coffee and whatnot and harass and talk about crazy, creepy things, Joe's got some crazy, creepy stories he can tell you of stuff that's happened to him while he's been working in those old buildings over there, some rather unnerving and unsettling things. And you just want to grab some great coffee, hop in and harass him.
Yeah,
Don't
absolutely.
forget Wild Acre, too, because they hooked us up with Cidercade.
Yeah.
We got so many guys and all of y'all that love us, man. We love all this stuff.
Yeah, we love it, man. It's cool.
Y'all are spoiling us.
And not just, it's really cool to meet interesting people, too.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, and that's what we've noticed is I always ask everybody, wherever we're at, pull them off and everything's real quiet. And you're like, hey, y'all ever seen anything weird? And everybody will be like, man, I got this one thing. Everybody's got one weird story that they can tell you that usually rolls into others. So always make sure when you get to talk and chat with somebody, hey, man, you ever seen anything weird? Don't forget. So, yeah, grab you a cup of coffee and go see something weird.
Yeah, and if you want to share those stories with us and the listeners, email the show, expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can call the show, 888-393-2783. Cam, what do you got planned for the rest of your week?
I am going to be over at a hospital helping my son finish up a few things.
More electrical work.
That's right. Yeah, doing some fancy stuff now, So I'm not doing the fancy stuff. I'm just a human clamp, but I'm still there for moral support.
Well, that's,
So
whatever, however
works.
You can help, you help.
That's right. That's right. But other than that, that's about it. I've been hanging out with my granddaughter and our great nephews have been over. We had a whole house full we had 3 kids under the age of 5 running around all days going crazy. It was great. It was madness, but it was one of those fun madnesses, like it's crazy, but it's okay if you do it just every now and then.
Right. I'll be doing some more continuing education. It's that time of year again where I got to pay excessive amounts of money to take classes on stuff that I already know how to do and been doing for 30 years. years. Thank you, state of Texas.
They're extorting you to keep you in business.
That's exactly all. That's all it is, man. That's all it is. But, you know, it could be worse. So
Could be.
That's about all the time we have for this episode. Be safe till next time. I'm Kyle. He's Cam.
Peace, y'all.